I just had the pleasure of reading Discrimination and Disparities, a book by Thomas Sowell, a 180-page masterpiece which completely dismantles the framework in which many of us understand the concept of discrimination, and more specifically, racism in modern America. Sowell flawlessly debunks the vague one-factor explanations of disparities on which the left often bases their collective belief that blacks and other minorities in America are inherently oppressed. This tome, that is, Discrimination and Disparities, along with Intellectuals and Society, Basic Economics, or any other of his publications, demonstrates a knowledge which transcends that of anyone who we would consider an intellectual by today's standards. Although primarily an economist, Sowell's insights on cultural philosophy should not be so easily dismissed. Rather, his ideas on culture and society should be theoretically seen as even more valuable because those ideas are originating from quantitative facts and analysis. Through reading Sowell's literature, it is evident that he carries a more realistic and comprehensive understanding of society than a building of journalists could dream of possessing. But something more can be said of Thomas Sowell, not simply through his writing, but by how he perceives himself and by how he views the world. Sowell never takes the role of the victim. He never claims to be inherently oppressed, as many groups in today's America often do. His sincerity of this self-perception is evident by the way he presents his arguments, in addition to his long list of academic accomplishments. But his mindset is not one typically present in the majority of Americans, particularly in the black community. In fact, groups that claim to champion the issues in the black community will advocate for just the opposite of what Sowell preaches. His questioning of the use of the word racism hits the nail right on the head. In his words, the word racism is like ketchup. It can be put on practically anything, but demanding evidence makes you a racist. On another occasion, he wrote this: "Racism is not dead, but it is on life support, kept alive by politicians, race hustlers, and people who get a sense of superiority by denouncing others as racists." It is truly astounding how Thomas Sowell, a member of the black community, offers sensible solutions and promotes personal responsibility for blacks, yet is so vehemently ostracized by the groups that could benefit from listening to him the most.
What the welfare system and other kinds of governmental programs are doing is paying people to fail. Insofar as they fail, they receive the money. Insofar as they succeed, even to a moderate extent, the money is taken away. This is even extended into the school systems, where they will give money to schools with low scores. Insofar as the school improves its education, the money is taken away, so that you are subsidizing people to fail in their own private lives and become more dependent upon the handouts.
Critics of Sowell, and left-wing pundits in general, like to view the world through a very narrow lens. When it comes to modern affairs, that lens tends to be one of race, not one of reason. Whenever there is a disparity, whether economic or social, the left immediately attributes it to injustice, rather than considering other factors. This is where Sowell excels at debunking the fallacies used by the left.
It is clear from these figures, as indeed I think it's clear to most of us from what we see, that there is a discrimination against blacks and against women.
Where you find people not represented evenly, that does not show the institutional effect, because almost nowhere in human affairs do you find people evenly represented. If you compare comparable people with respect to age, with respect to education, etc., you get a totally different picture, both with respect to blacks and women. Now, the figures that I saw, for example, show more recently that if you take black families where the husband and wife are both college educated and compare them to a white family where the husband and wife are both college educated, the black family is now earning $2,000 a year more. The problem is that very few blacks fall in that category.
But despite Sowell's explanations for these disparities, backed by factual and reasonable evidence, we still too often find topics of systematic racism and white privilege prominent in political discourse, aided only by these one-sided statistics. This is why conservatives should put Sowell, or at least his arguments, at the forefront of our political conflict. The reason why Sowell's ideas are so threatening to the left is not just because they hold factual plausibility and stand up under scrutiny, but because Sowell himself was once a leftist. Not only a leftist, but a self-proclaimed Marxist, and one that happened to be employed by the federal government.
After a year of studying under Milton Friedman, I was still a Marxist. But one summer of working in the government was enough to start returning around.
Really, what happened to you there?
Well, nothing happened to me, but that I realized that the government was nowhere close to being capable of doing what people on the left wanted the government to do. and that in fact we'd be lucky if they didn't make things worse.
This particular realization, a product of being able to think independently and rationally, dissociated from the groupthink and utopian ideals of the left, is what drives the left's fear of people like Thomas Sowell. It's what causes them to refer to him as an Uncle Tom, or a pseudo-intellectual, because they know, ultimately, that his theories shatter their narrative. Sowell's libertarian view on government intervention has led to the formation of some of the greatest arguments for the free market economy today. Within such arguments lies the acknowledgement that even a truly free society cannot root out all social injustices, but the attempt to do so will result in a much less appealing alternative. Behind all of Sowell's criticisms of the left, he has boiled it down to a test of 3 basic questions, which he claims can dismantle almost all of the left's ideas.
I've often said there are 3 questions that I think would destroy most of the arguments on the left. And the first is, compared to what? The second is, at what cost? And the third is, what hard evidence do you have? Now, there are very few ideas on the left that can pass all 3 of those kinds of things.
Although Sowell may be mature with age, his ideas are timeless. The right does not do itself justice by attempting to formulate new arguments to debates that have been won years ago. If the right's goal is to dominate the realm of political conversation and do it in a civil way, then our best option is to look back at the ideas of people like Thomas Sowell.